A car dealership abruptly closed its doors today, leaving already frustrated customers wondering what to do next.
Why are brand new cars gathering dust for over a year? Across America, dealership lots are frozen in time. 400 days of inventory on certain models, interest piling up, profit margins vanishing, and all of it tracing back to the post-pandemic markup boom, shattered trust, and rules that pulled the curtain back on the industry's secrets. Which brands are still flying off the lot? Which ones can't give cars away? And how does this change the price you'll pay in the next 6 months? The law that lit the fuse. In the summer of 2024, a regulatory grenade rolled right into the middle of America's car market. The Federal Trade Commission finalized what it called the Combating Auto Retail Scams Rule, or the CARS rule, a set of mandates that stripped away the layers of mystery long wrapped around the car buying process. For decades, dealerships had thrived in a space where prices were rarely fixed, optional add-ons quietly padded final bills, and customers were often nudged into extras they neither needed nor understood. The CARS rule cut directly into that territory. It required that every dealer advertise a true offering price, the actual out-the-door cost that included all mandatory fees. It banned junk fees for services that added no value, from phantom etching to overpriced nitrogen tire fills. And it demanded express, documented consent before any extra product or service could be sold alongside the vehicle. On paper, the changes looked like a win for the everyday driver. In practice, they threatened to dismantle the subtle revenue streams many dealers relied on to keep the lights on. Dealer lobbyists warned that the new compliance burden would choke small operators and reduce competition. Behind closed doors, dealership owners whispered about a collapse in front-end gross profits once the rule took effect. Margins in new car sales were already thin. Without the cushion of markups and quietly packaged extras, some feared they would be forced to overhaul their entire business model. It was not just a rule, it was an uninvited flashlight pointed into every corner of the showroom. This law didn't just rattle showrooms, it triggered a dealer panic like no one predicted. States turn up the heat. When a federal court vacated the CARS rule in late 2024, dealers exhaled with relief. They thought the immediate threat had been neutralized, but the sigh was short-lived. State attorneys general across the country had watched the debate unfold, and many saw an opening to flex their own enforcement powers. In Rhode Island, one dealership group agreed to pay over $1 million to settle allegations of hidden fees and deceptive add-ons. Arizona's Attorney General secured more than $2.5 million in consumer restitution from another chain. Illinois went even further, extracting a $20 million settlement from a network of dealers accused of widespread junk fee practices. These actions were not isolated. They were part of a clear pattern. States were stepping into the vacuum left by the federal reversal, using existing consumer protection laws to prosecute the same behavior the FTC had targeted. For dealers, this was a different kind of nightmare. Federal rules, even strict ones, at least offered uniformity. State-level enforcement meant a patchwork of laws and standards, forcing multi-state dealer groups to navigate a maze of compliance requirements. It also meant that politically ambitious attorneys general could make an example out of a single dealership to send a broader message. Dealers now found themselves in a more precarious position than before. Even without the CARS rule, the regulatory spotlight had turned toward them. But not everyone breathed a sigh of relief. State prosecutors smelled blood. If you're following this story, hit like so more people see it. Drop a comment with your thoughts. This is bigger than it looks, and I'm reading everyone. The markup boom years. Between 2019 and 2022, the average price of a new vehicle in America surged by more than 30%. While part of the increase could be traced to global supply shortages, inflation in materials, and higher labor costs, economists noted a more uncomfortable truth. Dealership markups played a major role. In those pandemic and post-pandemic years, the balance of power in car buying tipped dramatically towards sellers. With demand far outstripping supply, many dealers abandoned sticker prices altogether. Vehicles that once sold with modest discounts were now fetching thousands above the manufacturer's suggested retail price. Stories emerged of buyers paying $10,000, $15,000, even $20,000 over MSRP for popular trucks and SUVs. For dealers, these were boom years. For consumers, they were years of frustration, resentment, and financial strain. The Bureau of Labor Statistics eventually confirmed that dealership margins had expanded significantly during this period, making auto retail one of the quiet winners of pandemic-era economics. But the public memory of that surge has been slow to fade. Even as inventories began to recover, many consumers remained convinced that dealerships had taken advantage of them when times were tough. That lingering distrust became fertile ground for regulators and lawmakers seeking to justify crackdowns. Have you noticed how car costs climbed 30%? Dealers were quietly cashing in, and consumers paid the price. Franchise shields shattered. For decades, franchise laws across the United States have acted as a protective wall for dealerships, ensuring that car manufacturers could not sell directly to consumers, and that dealers maintained exclusive rights to local markets. These laws were originally framed as consumer protection measures, designed to prevent predatory behavior by powerful manufacturers. In reality, they often serve to insulate dealerships from direct competition and preserve their ability to set prices with considerable flexibility. Transparency mandates, like those envisioned in the CARS rule and mirrored in some state statutes, have begun to chip away at this protection by forcing dealers to disclose their true selling prices up front and banning certain markups. Regulators have effectively reduced the advantage of having a locked-in geographic territory. If every potential buyer can see a dealer's full price online and compare it instantly to others in neighboring towns or even states, the value of exclusivity erodes. Industry analysts warn that this is not just about pricing power. It is about the entire balance of control in the auto market. If transparency becomes standard, the traditional franchise model may lose much of its economic justification. And while dealers still have powerful allies in state legislatures, the tide of consumer sentiment is shifting rapidly in favor of openness and competition. The fortress walls have not yet fallen, but cracks are forming. Dealerships once shielded by franchise laws are suddenly exposed, literally dragged into the daylight. Lots frozen in time. Step onto certain dealership lots today, and the scene feels almost surreal. Asphalt expanses once reserved for the steady churn of arrivals and departures now sit crowded with gleaming vehicles lined up in precise formation. The sun reflects off spotless hoods, windshields glint in perfect rows, and tires show no sign of having touched a customer's driveway. These are not display models or special orders awaiting pickup. They are new cars, hundreds of them, parked in silence, day after day, week after week. In some cases, seasonal changes mark time more clearly than sales. A sedan that arrived under the bright sun of early spring now sits with autumn leaves caught in its wipers. A truck delivered in the first chill of winter still occupies the same space months later, its interior smelling faintly of that factory-new scent as dust settles on its dash. The stagnant air around these vehicles tells a story. They are waiting for buyers who may never come. The sight is not uniform across the industry. Certain lots pulse with activity, cars rolling in and out with brisk efficiency. But for many dealerships, the lot has become a storage yard for unwanted inventory. The quiet is broken only by the occasional shuffle of sales staff moving vehicles to keep up appearances, shifting them into slightly different arrangements so they do not look abandoned. Yet beneath the polished surfaces, the reality is clear. Time is the enemy. And every passing day without a sale deepens the strain. Picture this: rows of brand new cars gathering dust for months on end, brands divided. A walk through a Toyota dealership can feel almost theatrical in its pace. Cars roll off transport trucks and within hours or days are headed to new owners. A similar rhythm plays out at Hyundai stores, where fresh arrivals barely have time to cool before keys change hands. The sense of motion is constant. Vehicles seem to evaporate into the community as quickly as they appear. Contrast that with the experience at an Audi or Jaguar showroom. There, the same vehicles occupy the same spaces, visit after visit. The identical SUV you admired 2 months ago is still parked at the far end of the row, its paint gleaming under the same showroom lights. The sports sedan that seemed so promising when it debuted is now familiar in the worst way. Not because it has become a neighborhood fixture, but because it has never left the dealer's property. This split is not merely about production volume or availability. It is a reflection of trust and demand. Brands like Toyota and Hyundai have cultivated reputations for value, dependability, and delivering exactly what buyers expect. That trust translates into rapid turnover, even in a market where overall sales have slowed. On the other hand, certain luxury marques have seen their appeal fade as consumers weigh price against perceived benefit. The showroom may still exude prestige, but if the market has cooled on the brand, prestige alone cannot move metal. Whenever you visit a Toyota or Hyundai lot, cars vanish overnight. But stand in front of an Audi or Jaguar, and nothing moves. The cost of standing still. Dealerships do not buy vehicles outright with idle cash. They finance their inventory through what is known as floor plan lending, a system in which each car on the lot accrues interest until it is sold. In a healthy sales environment, vehicles move quickly enough that interest costs remain manageable. But when inventory sits, those costs multiply with punishing speed. Imagine carrying a loan on every single car you are trying to sell, month after month, with no end in sight. For some dealers, especially those tied to struggling models, the situation has crossed into crisis territory. 400 days of inventory on one vehicle means more than just a slow sales chart. It means paying interest for well over a year on an asset that is depreciating before your eyes. That interest does not vanish. It erodes profit margins, squeezes cash flow, and forces dealers to delay other investments just to keep current on payments. The problem compounds when multiple models are in the same predicament. Dealerships are not warehouses. They are retail operations designed to move goods quickly. When the flow stops, the entire system backs up. Vendors wait longer to be paid. Payroll becomes a heavier burden. Even basic upkeep, from lot maintenance to facility improvements, gets deferred. This financial chokehold can turn a profitable year into a loss and leave owners scrambling for ways to free up cash. We have over 400 days of inventory on a single model. That's the death knell for any dealer. Discounts in desperation. For buyers willing to shop strategically, the current market has opened rare opportunities. Some dealerships, desperate to unclog their lots, are offering price cuts that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Discounts running into the thousands off the manufacturer's suggested retail price are now common on slow-moving models. Certain dealers are pairing those markdowns with low-interest financing, extended loan terms, or generous trade-in allowances, all in a bid to convert stagnant inventory into cash. The result is a kind of short-term buying frenzy, but one driven more by necessity than celebration. Salespeople who once stood firm on pricing now volunteer the numbers before negotiations even begin. Managers approve deals that barely cover costs because holding onto the vehicle another month would be worse. In some cases, vehicles are moved in bulk through fleet sales or auction channels just to get them off the books. These deals can feel like windfalls for consumers, but behind the scenes, they are signs of an industry trying to stem financial bleeding. Each cut price represents a concession to the reality that waiting for a full margin sale is no longer an option. The hope is that lower prices will attract enough buyers to break the logjam, restore cash flow, and allow dealers to restock with vehicles that have a better chance of moving quickly. Bargain hunters rejoice, or so dealers hope, as they slash prices to clear the piles. The old order wobbles. For decades, franchise laws formed an invisible wall protecting dealerships from disruptive change. These state-level statutes dictated how cars could be sold, ensuring that automakers had to go through independent dealers rather than sell directly to consumers. It was a structure designed to preserve local business interests, keep pricing competition within certain bounds, and maintain a predictable distribution network. Most consumers never thought about these laws, yet they quietly shaped the rhythm of automotive commerce nationwide. Now, that once sturdy framework is showing cracks. New transparency rules and a shifting regulatory climate have begun eroding the advantages these laws once guaranteed. Dealers accustomed to exclusive territorial rights and consistent manufacturer support are discovering that their leverage is not as unshakable as it once seemed. Automakers are exploring ways to exert more control over pricing, inventory allocation, and even the customer relationship, areas that were historically the dealer's domain. If those protections continue to weaken, the entire national sales model could be reshaped. Traditional multi-dealer networks might give way to more centralized sales strategies, where fewer intermediaries stand between the manufacturer and the buyer. For some in the industry, that signals opportunity. For others, it sounds like the beginning of the end for a way of doing business that has lasted nearly a century. When unseen power structures fall, the entire game changes. And that's what's happening now. The direct sales disruption. Tesla's sales model, once viewed as an unconventional experiment, now looks prescient. From its earliest days, the company bypassed traditional dealerships entirely, selling directly to consumers through a network of manufacturer-owned stores and online platforms. That decision gave Tesla total control over pricing, inventory, and customer experience, advantages that are becoming more appealing as traditional dealerships wrestle with regulatory and market pressures. Without intermediaries, Tesla can adjust prices instantly across the country, matching demand without negotiating with hundreds of separate dealer principals. It can also manage inventory more fluidly, shifting vehicles to where they are most likely to sell. This agility has allowed Tesla to weather market fluctuations without the same level of unsold stock that now clogs many competitor lots. Other automakers have watched this with growing interest. Regulatory uncertainty is prompting them to consider whether direct sales, once dismissed as impractical for legacy brands, might now be feasible, especially for electric vehicles and other high-margin products. Pilot programs, online-only special editions, and manufacturer-controlled pop-up stores are already being tested in some markets. What was once a fringe strategy has become a template that even industry giants are evaluating. Tesla's direct sales model suddenly looks genius, and regulatory chaos could accelerate it. Cracks in the supply spine. When a dealership falters, the effects ripple outward in every direction. Employees are often the first to feel the strain. Sales staff face shrinking commissions as inventory stalls. Service departments see fewer warranty claims when manufacturers divert vehicles to different markets. Administrative teams get cut as cost-saving measures tighten. For many, the job that once promised steady income and advancement has become uncertain overnight. The impact extends beyond payroll. Lenders that finance dealership operations are beginning to reassess their risk. When inventory turnover slows to a crawl, repayment timelines stretch, and the perceived reliability of floor plan loans diminishes. Some banks and specialty finance companies are quietly reducing exposure, tightening lending criteria, or increasing interest rates for dealerships they consider vulnerable. Suppliers are also caught in the downturn. From local advertising agencies to regional parts distributors, many small and mid-sized businesses rely heavily on dealerships as steady clients. When dealers slash marketing budgets, defer facility upgrades, or cancel bulk orders for accessories, those suppliers feel the loss directly. The disruption compounds. Fewer sales mean less service work, which means fewer parts ordered, which in turn hits supplier revenue. Employees, lenders, and suppliers. Everyone's nerves are fraying as the backbone of dealerships snaps. Politics in overdrive. In the nation's capital, the sight of dealership lots filled with unsold vehicles is more than an economic data point. It is a political flashpoint. Lawmakers, lobbyists, and advocacy groups are all seizing the moment to push competing agendas. Industry associations are urging Congress and state legislatures to revisit or amend regulatory changes, warning of widespread business closures if relief is not granted. Dealer lobbyists are pressing for new protections to restore some of the leverage lost under transparency mandates. On the other side, consumer advocates argue that the current shakeup is proof that the system was flawed to begin with. They contend that dealers abused their position during the pandemic with excessive markups, and that tighter rules are a necessary corrective, even if the transition is painful. This has created a policy battleground where both sides invoke the language of fairness, one focusing on preserving small business viability, the other on protecting the consumer from inflated costs and opaque practices. Unions have also entered the fray, particularly those representing auto workers and dealership staff. They are lobbying for provisions that would safeguard jobs during the industry's restructuring, sometimes aligning with dealer groups and other times supporting consumer reforms. The unusual alliances and shifting rhetoric highlight how fluid the political landscape has become around this issue. With every passing month, the debate over how to stabilize or transform the dealership model grows louder. These empty lots are sounding alarms in Washington, not just boardrooms. America's transparency tide. What is happening to dealerships is not an isolated story about the auto industry. It is part of a broader transformation in how goods and services are bought and sold in the United States. Across multiple sectors, middlemen who once dominated their markets are being challenged by transparency, technology, and direct-to-consumer models. In real estate, buyers increasingly use digital tools to bypass traditional agents. In retail, big brands are opening their own online storefronts rather than relying on department stores. Even healthcare is seeing more direct-to-patient platforms emerge, cutting out layers of intermediaries. The dealership crisis mirrors these shifts almost perfectly. For decades, dealerships thrived on controlling information. Pricing, availability, and financing terms were carefully guarded. Now, rules that force open the books have stripped away that informational advantage. Consumers armed with real-time data can compare costs across cities, negotiate with confidence, and even place orders without stepping foot on a lot. What was once a world of limited choice is now one of almost infinite transparency. This power shift does not just change how cars are sold, it reshapes expectations for every purchase. As more industries embrace the same principles, customers may soon come to view old, opaque systems as unacceptable. The cultural tide is moving, and industries that fail to adapt could find themselves in the same position as today's struggling dealerships. This dealer meltdown isn't just about cars. It's a reflection of how power shifts in America right now. Wall Street on the hunt. To the market, disruption is not just a risk, it is an opportunity. The stock prices of publicly traded dealership groups have begun to diverge sharply, with those heavily dependent on legacy sales structures facing sharper declines. Investors and analysts are closely watching inventory turnover rates, profit margins, and the degree of exposure to underperforming brands. Under this scrutiny, weaker players stand out as prime acquisition targets. Private equity firms, flush with capital, see potential in snapping up distressed dealership networks, consolidating operations, and streamlining costs. The goal is to create leaner, more digitally integrated retail chains that can weather the transparency era. For some, that means acquiring not just the physical assets, but also the customer databases and service departments, which remain valuable revenue sources even when sales falter. Mergers between mid-sized dealership groups are also gaining traction. By combining resources, they hope to negotiate better terms with manufacturers and spread fixed costs across a larger base. However, such moves are not guaranteed to succeed. If the underlying market continues to weaken, even newly consolidated giants could struggle to deliver returns. Wall Street's watching, underperforming dealership groups are now the first to be targeted. Main Street in peril. In many small and mid-sized towns, the local dealership is more than just a place to buy a car. It is an employer, a sponsor of youth sports teams, and a contributor to civic life. When these businesses falter, the ripple effects extend far beyond their showrooms. Unions representing salespeople, service technicians, and administrative staff are sounding alarms about the potential scale of job losses. The concern is not abstract. Each dealership job often supports other local positions at parts suppliers, advertising agencies, cleaning services, and more. If 100 dealership jobs vanish in a rural county, the total economic impact can be double or even triple that number when indirect losses are included. For towns already facing population decline or limited industry diversity, such cuts can be devastating. Union leaders are lobbying for job protection clauses in any policy discussions about dealership reform. They are also urging manufacturers to consider transitional support programs for employees displaced by structural changes in the industry. Without intervention, they warn, the next few years could see an exodus of skilled workers from entire regions, leaving behind shuttered buildings and weakened tax bases. Dealership unions fear the wreckage could cost thousands of jobs in towns across America. If you've stayed this far, you're the kind of person who wants the full truth. Subscribe now so you don't miss what's coming next. It's only getting more explosive. The Buyers Crossroads. From a buyer's perspective, a struggling dealership can be both a blessing and a risk. In the short term, the pressure to move stagnant inventory often results in extraordinary deals. Vehicles sold at deep discounts, paired with aggressive financing offers. For those ready to purchase now, it can feel like an unprecedented opportunity. But the long-term picture is more complicated. As dealerships close or consolidate, access to service may shrink. Consumers could find themselves driving long distances to reach an authorized repair center, especially for warranty-covered work. In some cases, manufacturer support may transition to third-party service networks, which may not offer the same level of convenience or consistency. Resale value is another question mark. If a wave of discounted vehicles floods the market, it could depress used car prices for years, leaving buyers with a vehicle worth far less than expected when they decide to sell. That effect may be more pronounced in certain brands or models tied to the hardest-hit dealerships. For consumers, navigating this landscape will require careful timing, brand awareness, and an understanding that today's bargain could carry hidden costs down the road. The dealership meltdown is more than a story of corporate restructuring. It is a case study in how quickly a market can shift, reshaping not just industries, but everyday financial decisions for millions of people. This story is still unfolding, and the next chapter could hit even closer to home. If you want the truth before the headlines spin it, subscribe now. Hit the bell so you're first to know when the next wave breaks. Share this with someone who needs to see what's really happening. Because staying informed isn't just smart, it's survival in times like these.